and I was just trying to make friends. Along with that, through high school, that was my biggest thing, was fitting in and having friends. And one of my things is I don't say no to anybody. If you talk to Pastor Mike, he can tell you that. We have talks all the time. So then it went into anxiety because I'm like, well, nobody's going to like me. Nobody's going to want to do anything with me if I don't do everything for everybody else. When I turned 18, I rebelled against my parents. And they went to the lake for a weekend, and I had a guy I was dating that was not the best. And so they went to the lake, and I went and packed my stuff and moved out. Looking back, that was the worst decision of my life. You're all going to make mistakes, but you've got to learn from them. It was an abusive relationship that led me into drugs and pill addiction. I kind of went into survival mode, so that's how I got myself through the day, in and out. I mean, I thought I was doing great because I was able to hold a job. I still, paid all my bills, made everything work, but all I was doing was masking everything that I really needed help with. I ended up shutting everyone out. I wasn't allowed to see my family, be around them much. I mean, I got to see them for holidays every now and then. I mean, I cut ties with everyone. In 2018, that was my breaking point. I had enough of where I was at, and I had started getting really angry with the fact that, because my mom would reach out, and she would send me messages and reach out and say, hey, if you need help, you need anything, is everything okay? She tried to push me into going to church with her. I'm like, no, it's okay, I'm fine. Well, in doing that, there was one night that her and her best friend had came and approached me at work, and they knew something was wrong. Sorry. That was the night that I was told that I would be killed, and my family as well. Thank you. That I wasn't worth anything, nobody else was going to want me, my family wouldn't take me back. Well, I was at work that night after dealing with all of that, and my mom and her best friend came in, and they pulled me to the back, and they said, we don't know what's going on, but you're not going home. So I did not. They saved me that night. I never went back. I was still trying to get pushed into, going to church, but I had anger. I didn't understand why God let me go through this, why God let me have these addictions and this pain. And, in July of 2018, I had started therapy. In the middle of July, I had finally became sober, and I got my family back. I had support. It made me feel very weak in asking for help, but that's what it takes. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're asking for help from friends, family, doctors. I mean, God provides these options for us. There's counselors, there's mentors. I mean, you guys have a great system here for the youth program. It doesn't make you weak whatsoever. It doesn't make you a bad person for needing help. Life is rough. This world is evil. I mean, you guys see it every day. But, I mean, there's many options out there. You just have to seek and be willing to accept it. So in 2018 as well, I had still going through therapy, didn't think, I still had in my mind I wasn't worthy of anybody, I wasn't going to be with anybody. I was just, basically I owned the diner at this point, and I was just going to run that for the rest of my life. In September of 28, I met my husband, and he stood by me mentally and made sure that I got through everything, even though we didn't know each other at all. We actually met on the internet, which I don't suggest now, but we did. It's changed a lot since then. From 2018 to 2024, I had several challenges. I still wasn't really opening up and giving my life to God. I just kind of filled my plate and kept running and doing everything to kind of put the pain in the past and kind of ignore that from healing. In March of 24, I had a complete breakdown. My husband was at the fire station. I went and found him, and I lost it. I felt like I was failing at everything, and a lot of that's because I didn't say no. I worked all the time, and then I was a mom, I was a wife, and I just didn't think I was doing a great job at that. He's like, you need to go talk to Mike. Mike's your person. That's who we go to. So we did. He met me that day at the church. We sat out there, we talked, we prayed, and that was the day that I gave my heart to God. In saying that, I mean, it was a fast run through of my life, but there is a few points that I went through my Bible, I prayed over this, and there's a few things that definitely popped out at me, in that God's gonna forgive us. As you just confess your sins, he's always there. I was blinded by that for quite a while, and I never believed that I would be good enough. But no matter how far you've fallen in your addiction or sin of any kind, there's always a way back through if you seek God. You're also never alone. You need to know your worth. One of the scriptures that I went off of was Psalms 8:3-5. A summary of that is, the next time you question your worth as a person, remember God considers you highly valuable. We have great worth, but we bear the stamp of the Creator. Because God has already declared how valuable we are to him, we can be set free from feeling worthless. And then a rundown of Matthew 10:29-31. When opposition comes, fear can overcome us, but God sees you and everything that happens in the world, even to sparrows who are far less valuable to him than we are. He sees you and knows what you're facing. God showed us valuable you are to him by sending his only son to die for you. Because God places such a value on you, you need never fear personal threat or difficult trials. These can't shake God's love or dislodge his spirit from within you. This doesn't mean that God's gonna fix it, like he's gonna just take all your troubles away. I mean, you've got to put in work as well. If I were to stand here and say that, I still don't fight temptations every day of life, they're out there. But that's where then I either go and I get on my Bible, I look in my Bible for a scripture, I go talk to my husband and lead me back in that path of, you don't need that, that's not going to make you feel better, you are worthy, you got this, you just need to give it all to God.
Thank you. Everybody breathe. Wasn't that great? That's great. You can sit down. I'm going to call you back up in a little bit. Don't go too far. All right. Chris, where you at? So, don't be jealous of the hair. That's all I got to say. Ever since I've known him, I said, well, he's got his hair going for him. But anyway, isn't this great? Come on. Anyway, this is Chris Spillman. If you don't know who he is, Matt, it runs the sound up there. They're brothers. So it's good. And Lucas's uncle, or nephew, whatever. Anyway, so this is Chris Spillman. Give him a hand.
All right, well, I grew up here in Holden. Lived here most of my life. Graduated from Holden High in 2005. Actually, I just recently had my 20-year class reunion. So if you do the math, I'll tell you how old I am. So I had a pretty normal childhood growing up. Played sports, ride bikes, with friends, my brothers, and the usual fighting and bickering and whatnot. So all that was all pretty good. But fast forward, to my teen years, get into high school. Started experimenting with, alcohol, marijuana, and, kind of you would think, the usual teen stuff, but the friends I had, at the time, they were, doing that stuff, and I thought it was, kind of a normal thing to do, growing up. So about, I'd say probably 14 years old was the first time that I had actually gotten drunk. It was over at a friend's house. And we're just playing pool. There's a few of us there, and his dad had a refrigerator in there, and it was full of beer. And so, he started passing beers around, and I drank my first beer, and I was like, that's all right, not too bad, right? Yeah, about 3 or 4 beers in, I'm starting to feel kind of funny, and didn't realize it, but I was actually pretty drunk at the time, and didn't think anything of it. We went inside, went to bed, and woke up the next morning. I didn't have a hangover or anything like that, and but a few years on down the road, I'd drink here and there with them. I didn't, wasn't anything I'd really thought of, just have a few beers with the friends every now and then. But about age 15 or 16 is when I started smoking marijuana. And, it was one of those things that you don't think it at the time, you just think you're having fun, and that's, it is what it is. And, throughout Holden High School, that's what I did. I think some of the teachers and other staff in the school, I was pretty big into it. I was kind of known as a stoner, I guess you could say. I hid it pretty well, from my parents, except for one time. Mom was in my room. I think she was cleaning my room or something, and found my stash hidden underneath my dresser, so, and of course, Dad, he took it, put it in a coffee can and burned it right in front of me, and I was just like, I can just go get more, And, but, so all throughout high school, I drank, smoked marijuana, and there was a time that I had tried meth for the first time. I was probably maybe 17, probably. Was over at a friend's house, and seen one of my friends bust out this glass pipe, and I asked him, I was like, "What is that?" He's like, "It's speed." And I was like, "What's that?" He's like, it's meth. And I was like, "Oh. Okay." And he's like, "We're gonna do it." He's like, no pressure, I'm not gonna have you do it if you don't want to, So I was like, okay. So I sat there and watched him, and I was like thinking, I kind of want to, my curious mind. I've always had a curious mind, and so I was like, well, I asked him, I was like, I just want to try it, just try it once, what's that gonna do, right? So, throughout the whole night, we're sitting there smoking meth, and, I'm just, I decided, I was like, well, I'm just going to go home and, sleep it off, whatnot. You don't sleep off meth, you don't sleep at all when you're on meth. So I go to lay down in my room, and I'm sitting there, and my mind's just racing, I'm like, man, I cannot sleep at all. And so I text my friend, man, I was like, I can't sleep. And he's like, yeah, you're not going to. And I was like, okay, well. And so I just wrote it out throughout the whole night, you know, get up the next morning, and I felt like crap. Like I was like coming down off it, and I felt like I just hit like a truck. And so that was my first experience with that. And so I didn't really do it too often or at all, really, because the way it made me feel afterwards, you know, it kind of just led me away from it. And I think that was kind of a good, you know, it was a good thing, you know. It's like something, you don't want to do something that makes you feel like crap all the time. But fast forward a few years, I turned 21, and of course, you know, old enough to buy alcohol, and so I wasn't drinking all the time. It wasn't like every night or something like that, but every once in a while, I'd get off work, I'd get a six-pack of beer, and, you know, I'd drink it, and then, you know, I just didn't have like one or two. I'd drink the whole six-pack, you know, so. Later on, I moved, actually, let me back up here. My girlfriend at the time, she was living with me in Holden. She went to school at MU, and she graduated and decided to move in with me. And I got her pregnant with my first son, Connor. And halfway through the pregnancy, she decides that she wants to move back to Columbia. So I was like, okay, you know, that's, you know, a fresh start, you know, new town. And so moved there, and, you know, the whole time, you know, I was a nervous wreck. I never knew what anxiety was at the time, and, you know, my nerves were shot. You know, I was nervous about getting a new job, being in a new town, and like not knowing anybody. And you know, I started drinking like almost every night. And at the time, you know, you don't think anything of it. You're just going through the motions, and that's what helped calm my nerves. You know, and I was still smoking marijuana at the time too. And you know, for years, you know, I used alcohol and drugs, you know, to ease my anxiety and stress and stuff like that. And it had gotten to the point where I started drinking hard alcohol, and I was got to the point where I was drinking probably, you know, a bottle almost every night. You know, just to the point where I just, you know, get drunk and like it helped me sleep. I thought it was helping me sleep. And so I pretty much was drinking quite a bit, you know, throughout the whole time I lived in Columbia. When I got a job and, you know, made some friends at the new job, and we would go out and party and have drinks, and you know, I'd come home drunk, and of course, you know, my wife at the time, you know, she didn't really frown upon it, but every time I'd come home drunk, she wasn't really too happy about it either, you know, so. But later on down the road, I actually went to a different job. I met a couple other friends, my buddy Jason, and like me and him were inseparable pretty much. You know, he was my ride or die there in Columbia. We became best friends, and me and him, we, you know, he liked to drink too. He was a drinker. Yeah, but once we got comfortable with each other, you know, we would actually, you know, I'd actually experimented with pills. I've done, you know, tried, you know, Percocets, OxyContin, Xanax, you know, whatever, you know, we get our hands on, basically. But after a while, he also did meth too. I mean, but he kind of hid it from me and was like, "Hey, man," he's like, "I didn't know how you felt about it," and he's like, "I just wanted to be honest with you." He's like, "I like to, you know, get high sometimes," and I was like, "Yeah," it's like I've done it before, and I was like, I'm not really, I guess, opposed to it, but you know, I haven't done it in a long time, and so I don't know what it was, but with him, I'd go over to his house a lot, and we we'd party it up. It was 3, 4, 5 nights out of the week, and it got to the point where I was doing meth behind my ex-wife's back. I mean, she had no clue. You know, I hid it pretty well. Of course, I was drinking a lot, still smoking marijuana, and I didn't really let it affect my life, you know, too much until later on down the road, which I'll get into here in a minute. But there was one night I was over at Jason's house, and we were drinking and taking Xanax, and I'd gotten to the point where I was like, I knew I couldn't drive, and I was just like, so I texted my ex-wife, and told her, like, "Hey, I'm staying here tonight. I drank too much, you know, I'm not going to be coming home." And she's like, "Okay, I'd rather you stay there and then drive and get into an accident or something." And I'm sitting there in his recliner, and, you know, it's gotten pretty late, and they're getting ready to go to bed, and I pass out. And so I wake up the next morning, and I have a different shirt on. I'm like, why did I have this shirt? Like, what's going on? And so when Jason and his girlfriend get up, I asked him, I was like, "How did I get this shirt on me?" And he's like, "Well," he's like, "me and Don were getting ready to go to sleep, and we heard you like coughing and gagging, and so we went and checked on you, and you were choking on your own vomit." And he's like, "We just about closed the door and went to bed." And he's like, "We hurried up, tilted you forward, you know, got your throat cleared out and everything, and you know, you had vomit, you know, all down your shirt and everything, and we got you all cleaned up, put the shirt on you, and made sure everything was all right, and we you know, went to bed, and I was just like, man." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, I was like kind of shocked. I was like, I almost could have died that night, choking on my own vomit. And it didn't really stop me from doing the things I was doing, you know. It was just kind of like, oh, it happened, everything's okay. And but a few months later, I was back over at Jason's again. Like I said, I was over there all the time, and we were drinking a little bit. You know, I think we're taking some Percocets or something like that, some painkillers, and He's like, hey man, he's like, I'm gonna go have dinner with my parents, you know. It's like, you know, I'll talk to you tomorrow when I get up. And Jason, he was a pretty big guy. He was pretty heavy set. He had sleep apnea and he had asthma. And but the next morning I get a call from his girlfriend Dawn, and I ignored the call because I was just like, I'm tired. I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to talk to anybody right now. She calls back again. I ignore it. And she had my ex-wife's phone number too, just, you know, just in case something was to happen to me, she could call her and let her know. But she comes upstairs. It's like, you need to answer Dawn's phone call. I was like, okay. And so right after that, she calls and she's just hysterical. Like, I could barely make out what she was even saying. And she finally got calmed down, and she's like, Jason passed away last night. And I was just like, what do you mean? I just saw him. And she's like, well, I was getting ready for bed, and I always check on him, you know, every once in a while to make sure, because he had sleep apnea really bad, and she would always check on him because he would pass out before she would. And he stopped breathing in his sleep, and mixing the pills and alcohol, having asthma and sleep apnea, and then just finally, you know, it caught up to him. And that one, it really messed me up. Like I said, he was my best friend. So after that, you know, I was a wreck. I'd, you know, just lost one of the closest people to me, and I just started drinking even more than I was. I was drinking constantly. Like, I would drink during the day, my days off, and get drunk. I was just being totally irresponsible. I would pass out in the middle of the day, you know, and wake up, you know, start drinking again, and it got to the point where my ex-wife was just like, I think you need to go to therapy. I think you got something going on that you need to get out, because you can't keep doing what you're doing. And I did. I started going to therapy and everything, and it kind of helped out, but I was still drinking a lot. I was still you know, doing pills, smoking weed. I was still, you know, doing it all. I was just trying to numb the pain, you know, from losing him, and like it really just got to me. And so it got to the point my drinking got so bad that my ex-wife, I don't know, we'd get into arguments about it all the time, and I was just like, I'm fine, you know, don't worry about it, you know, but it ultimately led, you know, to us getting divorced. At the end of the month, I moved out, got my own apartment, and then I spiraled down even farther. You know, I had been with her, you know, for 13 years, and I just, you know, lost another person that I had loved, and it tore me apart. Like, I didn't want it to happen, but she already made up her mind it was going to happen. You know, like, she just got tired of my drinking, you know, me doing stupid stuff while I was drunk, being irresponsible, you know, not helping her out with the kids. And so I got my own place, and that's when I basically turned it up to 11. You know, I was doing anything that I could get my hands on. Started doing a lot more meth. Like I said, any type of pill I could get my hands on, and I was drinking even more than I'd ever had. I mean, I was just in a dark place. Not too long after that, I met another woman, and it was basically through somebody, basically, like one of my dealers, someone I was getting the drugs from, and I met her, and we started hanging out, doing, mainly just doing as much meth as possible. I mean, we were just, and I mean, every time we'd hang out, that's what we were doing. We were just smoking meth, just all night long until the next day. I mean, it was just, and eventually she, I don't know if her lease was up on her apartment or where she was staying, but I told her, I was like, well, I've got another room in my apartment. You just come live with me. And that's when things started to get really bad. We were pretty toxic towards each other. I mean, we were always arguing, fighting about something. I think a lot of times because she had her own room. She stayed in her own room a lot, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was hiding something from me. And I understand why now. But she was using heroin and fentanyl. And I'd always ask her, why she always stayed in her room a lot. And she's just like, I like to be by myself. She's like, don't worry about it. Until one night, I walk in on her, and she usually kept the door locked. For some reason, I don't know if she forgot to lock the door or what, but I'd seen her sleeping. I thought she was sleeping, but she was passed out. From doing heroin or fentanyl, and I guess I didn't think anything of it. I seen a syringe laying there, and I was just like, at the time, I didn't care. I was in a dark place, and I was just like, it is what it is. I was like, pretty much, I just didn't care. I didn't care about anything, One night, she comes out of her room, and I'm just sitting there watching TV or on my phone or something. She's like, hey. She's like, she didn't really have a job. She just kind of bounced around doing odd jobs and stuff like that, and just, but she's like, hey, I need some money. She's like, I was wanting to know if you want to buy this heroin from me, because I'd never done it before. I was just, like I said, it's just alcohol, pills, meth, marijuana. That's all I did. And I was like, I never done it before. I was like, I guess, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was just like, yeah, why not? Just, I've done everything else, why not try this too, so maybe it'll help me forget about some of the things I don't want to forget about, because nothing else is helping. So after that, first time I tried it, I was like, this is bad to say, but I was like, this is great. I like this. You know, just like with everything else I've tried, you know, just like it made me feel a different type of way. You know, made me feel like it just took all my worries away. It was just, and I thought I'd found something that helped me, you know, cope with the things that I was going through. And so I kept having her, you know, buy the heroin for me, and I'd buy it off her or whatever. And it was another night. She's like, "Hey, you ever tried? You know, if you like doing heroin, why don't you, you know, try some of this?" And I was like, "Well, what's that?" She's like, "It's fentanyl. It's like heroin, but a lot stronger." And I was just like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm getting a tolerance to doing heroin all the time, so why not, you know, try something a little stronger? You know, that way I can, you know, go further into my addiction." You know, at the time I wasn't thinking about it, but so first time I tried it, to me it was just like doing heroin. I just, you know, it was just, but it seemed like it just lasted longer. You know, it was definitely not the smartest thing to do. Until one night, I was in the bathroom. You know, I did some fentanyl, and this is what she told me. I don't remember what happened. But I walk out of the bathroom and into the kitchen, and she just said that she could just see it on my face, that something just wasn't right. And as soon as I go into the kitchen and start talking to her, she said, I fell out. I collapsed. And she said she caught me, laid me down on the floor, and I was overdosing. From what she told me, she said she tried everything, tried to get me to snap out of it. Because there was a few times before she had thought that I was overdosing, but I don't know what they did, but they'd get me to snap right back, you know, into consciousness. We didn't have Narcan on hand or anything, but so she lays me down on the floor there in the kitchen, and she's trying to get me to come back to it, and just nothing's working. You know, she's putting ice all over my body, you know, trying to make the cold, you know, sometimes you do that, it'll shock your body, you know, and help you snap out of something like that. You know, she was smacking me across the face, punching me in my chest, you know, where my heart was, because she said that I wasn't breathing, I didn't have a pulse. After all that, she finally calls the ambulance. Like I said, I had no idea. Of course, you know, so I guess the ambulance gets there, and they're giving me Narcan, and I finally snap out of it. I don't know how long it took me, but the first thing, when I opened my eyes, the first thing I heard was one of the paramedics to say, there he is. We've got him back. And I could just hear the relief that was in her voice. And I wake up, open my eyes, and I've got all these paramedics, police officers standing around me. They had drugged me from the kitchen into my living room. And so I'm looking up at all these people. I'm like, what are you guys doing here? What just happened? And the lady I had living with me at the time, she was standing at my feet. She's like, "Hey, I'm right here. You know, everything's okay? You're fine?" He's like, I'm right here. And so after, they kind of get me woken back up a little bit, I guess you could say, get me to answer a few questions. They put me in the ambulance, and one of the paramedics, the one that gave me the Narcan, she tells me, she's like, that was the most Narcan that I've had ever give somebody. And it just hits me, and I just start bawling. I'm sitting there crying in the ambulance, and she's like, it's okay. She's like, the first thing you got to do is get help. And so I'm just sitting there I got pretty lucky because the ambulance is only like they were right down the road from my apartment. They got there in like 5 minutes. Any longer than that, I probably wouldn't be standing here. So they get me into the hospital, and I'm just laying in the hospital bed, and they've got an IV in me, and they keep coming in and checking on me every once in a while because I keep falling back asleep, passing out. And every time I do, they come in and wake me up. And finally, I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, they finally released me. I go back home, get some sleep, maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I go to work the next day. I didn't want anybody to know what happened. I didn't tell anybody what happened. I was embarrassed, ashamed. I could have called my boss and told him I'm not coming into work today. I just overdosed on fentanyl. But I was like I said, I was too embarrassed to admit that I even had any sort of problem. Like, no one knew at work that I was doing that type of stuff. I would go into work high on meth. Like I said, I hid it pretty well. I did a lot of that stuff pretty secretively, and but you think I would have learned my lesson after that, but a few days later, I decided I wanted to get high again. And so by this time, the woman that was with me, she had moved out. She got tired of me again. She didn't like it when I drank. So I did something one night. She got mad at me, and she had someone come pick her up, and she moved all her stuff out. But she knew the person that I was getting, the fentanyl from, and she found out because she even that night when she came and picked me up from the hospital, she told me, she's like, I think you need to stop. Even though she was in her active addiction then there, she's like, if you don't stop, she's like, you will die. She's like, I've been doing it so long that, she's like, I'm stuck where I'm at. She's like, but she's like, if you don't stop now, she's like, you're ending up where I am. And like, she had overdosed a few times, but it wasn't anything to where it was like bad. She never overdosed when she was living with me. She had been doing it for so long that, she had built up a pretty good tolerance to it. But, I had gotten a high a few times after that, and again, one time, I actually had someone else living with me at the time, and like, she was there, and she knew I was doing it, and I'd gotten high, and I just, you pass out. That stuff, it'll put you down. Like, she thought I was overdosing again. And so she takes a cold bucket of water and dumps it on my head, and I'm like, I wake up, I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, just leave me alone. You know, just let me do my thing. And she's like, well, I don't want you to die. I was like, I'm not going to. I was like, don't worry about it. Anyways, the other woman that moved out, that was, like I said, she had found out I was doing it again, and she just shows up at my door and just beating on the door. And she was pretty mad. She'd found out that I was doing it again, like, because that night when she told me to stop, I was like, yeah, I'll stop. I'm gonna stop. You know, I lied to her. I didn't stop, of course. And she's like, and like I said, she told me, she's like, you will end up dying if you keep doing this. And she's like, and so she, you know, she's talking to me, and she finally convinced me. She's like, just whatever I had left, she took it away from me. And she's like, I don't want to hear you buying any more from him, because she knew who the dealer was. It's where she was getting her stuff from. And I guess she had asked him, and he had told her that I was buying from him still. And she's like, I won't be your friend anymore. She's like, she's like, I don't want to, because she's had other friends overdose and die. And so I quit that cold turkey. And like I said, I wasn't that deep into it to where I had, like, you know, withdrawals and stuff like that from it that weren't too terribly bad. You know, I toughed it out. But so, like I said, I was still drinking a lot, you know, still doing meth, and just, it got to a point where I was just like, I was tired of living the way I was, but I was still doing the same thing that I was doing. You know, it was just like, it got to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore. You know, I was just like, and so eventually, after struggling for a couple years, I had called my parents a few times, you know, asking them for money, because all my money was going to drugs and alcohol, and, you know, to help pay my rent and help, you know, pay, you know, put gas in the tank of my car and get food and stuff like that. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back was I let somebody use my car. They'd hit something with it, and it messed up the front end of my car, and basically broke a power steering line. Like, went out, because I was going out the next morning. She'd come in, and she didn't tell me she had done anything to my car. I go out the next morning, and I go to get in my car and start driving, and I was just like, what is going on? My car's not acting right. It's not steering right. I get out and look, and there's just this power steering fluid. I see a trail all the way from my parking spot through the whole parking lot of the apartment complex. And I go in, and I just start going off on it. I was like, basically just, I had it up, you know, up to here with everything, and I didn't have any money to fix my car. And so I called my mom and dad that morning, and I was just like, I need you guys to come down here, and I need you to fix my car so I can get to work tomorrow. And Mom and Dad are like, well, I don't think you're going to be going to work tomorrow. You need to come home. And I was just like, yeah, I think you're right. You know, so they come down, we get my car fixed. Come back to Holden. Next morning, the plan was to go back to Columbia, get all my stuff moved out, And we did. And so I come back to Holden, and I'm doing good. You know, I'm still drinking, but not a lot, still smoking weed. But I'm not doing meth. I haven't been doing any pills. You know, it wasn't heroin, no fentanyl, nothing. I was doing pretty good. And I got a job, you know, been a few months. You know, I just kind of, I guess, took time away from everything before I got a job, just kind of, you know, get myself collected. But after I got the job, I don't know what it was, but I call it getting an itch. I had an itch to start, like I wanted to do meth again. So at the time, I knew a few people that I could buy it from, and I started smoking meth again. You know, still have my job, still going to work high. Again, you know, no one knew. I knew how to hide it. I don't know what it was, but if you've ever seen anybody that was on meth or speed, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, you can definitely tell that they act a little funny. Something's just not right with them, the way they act. And so I was doing that, and I was just smoking it at first. And back when I was in Columbia, I was an IV user. Every once in a while, you know, it wasn't like I was doing it all the time, but for some reason I had the great idea to start using needles again. And for about 4 years, I was sticking a needle in my arm 2 to 3 times a day. You know, just getting high on meth. I was really hitting it hard, really hard. I wore long sleeves as much as I could. My arms were all bruised up. Once you start doing that, it's really hard to stop using. They say 2% of people that start using meth, you know, intravenously, an IV, a needle, that only 2% of people that start doing it recover from it. But anyways, I was doing a lot of meth. I was getting it cheap. That's the thing. I was getting it real cheap. I was buying what they call an 8-ball, which is like 3-point-something grams or whatever. And I was going through an 8-ball probably every week and a half. And the thing is, you know, I'll just start doing it every once in a while, you know, here and there, like I said, it turned into every day. It was just once a day, and then once you start getting tolerance, you know, 2 times a day, 3 times a day. And while you're on that drug, you don't really realize how far you get into it. It grabs a hold of you, and you don't realize how deep you've gotten into it. And at the time, you know, I thought it was fun. I thought I was having fun. I was having a good time. And that's what those drugs do. They trick your mind into thinking that it's okay. You know, you're just having fun. It's all right. But it gotten to the point, and another thing is, for some reason, usually when you're on meth, you don't eat, you don't sleep. For some reason, I don't know what it was with me, but I could actually eat some food and sleep. I was eating, 2 or 3 times a day. I'd eat lunch. I would eat dinner with my parents. And I was sleeping, I was only sleeping maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. But after a while, and I didn't really lose. I lost some weight, but it wasn't a lot. But if you ever seen anybody, meth addicts, they get, some of them get pretty skinny. Some of them almost like skin and bone, pretty much. The ones that, get into it real bad. But I kept a pretty good diet. I was drinking lots of water. But after doing it as much as I was, for as long as I was, you don't realize it, but your mental health starts to really just disintegrate. There's one night, I was living with my parents at the time. I was living in the basement. My room's down in the basement. And one night I thought somebody had gotten into the basement. And I kept my rifle downstairs with me, and I thought there was a room down there, separate from the room I was in. This is where it was like, the hot water heater and stuff like that's in there, and I thought someone was in there. So I grab my rifle, I get behind the pool table, and it's, I don't know, it's maybe 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I start yelling at whoever thought I was in that room. And Mom hears me. She wakes up. She comes downstairs. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I thought there was somebody in that room in there." And she's like, "There's nobody in here." She's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Just go back to bed." And that was one of the things I remember. And I was just like, and she opens up the door and she's like, "There's nobody in here." It was just like, could have fooled me. I thought someone was actually in there. And so there's another time that I was actually on the phone with one of my friends, or somebody I thought was a friend at the time. And I thought he was acting kind of weird, like we were both high. And he says something, and it's just like, makes me think, like, for some reason I thought he was at the back door. And so I go to the back door, I'm looking around. There's nobody there, so I go back downstairs, and I thought I heard footsteps upstairs. And, but anyways, I thought he'd got to the house, and I start freaking out. Mom and Dad call the cops. Cops come over, and paramedics are there too, and they're looking at me, and they're just like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just thought somebody was in the house." And anyways, my mental health got so bad, I got suicidal. I got to the point, I don't know what happened, but I almost took my life. I don't know what exactly happened, but my friend Michelle, she comes over, she sees me laying in bed with my rifle, I'm sleeping, and she takes me to the emergency room in Lee Summit, and they admit me to a place in Smithville, and I was there for about a week. Detox off meth. They put me on all sorts of medication. And as soon as I got out of there, I decided I wanted to get high again. And so I did. I did for a few days. I decided, if I keep doing this, I'm going to end up right back where I was. And whatever I had left, I just flushed it down the toilet. And I was just like, I'm done. I was just like, I can't keep doing this. So let's fast forward a little bit. Been clean off meth for probably maybe about a year or so. I was still living with mom and dad. Everything's going good. And so they decided it's time for me to get my own place. I get my own place. And I wasn't drinking that much at the time. I was just a few drinks here and there, but anyways, for some reason I started drinking heavily again. And it was to the point where I had lost my job. I was calling in. I don't know if I was depressed or what it was, but I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go to work. All I wanted to do was stay home, drink, and that's what I did. I would drink all day long, all night long, wake up, repeat, and I did that for months. Until one day, I'm just sitting on the couch watching TV, drinking, and I hear a knock on my door. And supposedly, the only thing I remember is being put into the ambulance, but supposedly, Pete, he was there, but like I said, I don't even remember him being there at all. I don't even remember answering my door. I don't even remember opening it. So mixing alcohol with the medications I was on, it was basically, I was like a zombie. I was just there. I was just living. That's all I was doing. But Pete said that I was basically just walking death. And he said he got body cam footage. I haven't seen it yet. It's been almost 2 years now, pretty close to it. But they get me to the hospital. They put an IV in me. They get some fluids in me and get me sobered up. My buddy Andy was there. He had been through addiction himself, heroin and fentanyl as well, but he'd been clean for a while. And I'm sitting in the hospital bed, and he's like, hey man, he's like, you need to get help. Him and my mom both were there, and they're like, you have to go get some help. And so I decided it's probably a pretty good idea. I've been doing this for way too long. Something had to change. And so I go in detox for 3 days. I had to be medically detoxed. Withdrawals from alcohol, if you're not monitored and given the right medication, you can die. It was that bad. I had gotten that bad. So they gave me into a program, a 28-day program. I did that, graduated from that, got a certificate and all that. And it was the first time that I've been completely sober in a month that I can remember. I mean, before the time that I moved, back from Holden, I wasn't completely sober. Like I said, I was drinking, smoking weed, but that was the first time that I can remember in my adult life I had been sober for straight month with any type of substance in my body. And I have my friends, my family, thank for all their support that I've through all this. They could have all the stuff that I've done. They've been there. They could have just been like, "You're too much. We're not going to do this," and they could have just left me on my own. But they didn't. They were there with me the whole time. And I'm pretty lucky for having that, because a lot of people don't, and that's why they're still stuck. Their addiction today is because they need that support system. And if you don't have that support system, I mean, it's really tough. But, you know, and I thank God every day that I'm still here. There was definitely 2 times in my life where I probably shouldn't have been here, for sure. Like, but it's been a long journey. It's been tough, but you know, it's been kind of easy at the same time because I was ready for it. And that's the thing. You have to be ready. You have to be willing to help yourself. You know, once you live like that for so long, you get tired of it. I mean, it's you have to do something. You have to be willing to change that. And I think a lot of that helped when last year I decided to give my life to God, follow Jesus. I don't remember when it was. It was sometime last year, March or April, or was it April? Okay, when I got baptized. Yeah. But ever since then, and the things have just gotten easier, it seems like. Because I can tell you, when I first got out of rehab, you know, I was on a medication that helped with cravings, and like I still had cravings for alcohol. But after those first 3 months, you know, it seemed like it was a breeze. I mean, and actually, the 28th of this month, I'll be clean and sober for 18 months from alcohol. It's about 2 years clean from meth. And about 6 years clean from heroin and fentanyl. And so, you know, I never thought my entire life that I would be in, you know, in any type of situation like that, but it's something you don't think about. It just happens. And all you have to do is to stop and think about what you're doing. Like, I didn't do that. Some of the things that I let get to me, you know, I wasn't thinking. And you'll get yourself into a mess pretty quickly if you don't stop and think about a few things there. But I'm just glad to be standing up here and talking to y'all tonight. I mean, it's, you know, I've got my whole family, my church family, that just, you know, they supported me throughout this whole thing, and I can't thank them enough. You know, I don't know what else to say. I'm happy to be here.
Good job. So when he was talking, there's a couple interesting things. Is that you guys can go ahead and sit down. That one of the interesting things is that he would talk 10 minutes about how bad things are, and then he would say, and that's when it really got bad. And then he would go down that path 10 more minutes, and then he'd be like, well, this is really when it took a turn for the worse. And I was like, how can it get worse? And it just kept getting worse and worse. And so the reason why I wanted these two to talk was because the similarities that they have with us and Holden were from here, and when they grew up here, they seemingly had just a normal childhood. And they both also had a background around church. They knew about God and everything, and they always had someone praying for them the whole time. And what I noticed is, you guys can go up if you'd like to. What I noticed is that it wasn't, they didn't see each step as it was coming, how bad it was getting. until they had gone too far with it, right? Right? They had got themselves a little too deep. And if you were to ask me in this community with students, what do students deal with a lot? Students deal with tons of stuff, and I understand that. I get that. And some of you have never seen meth and have never thought about meth or fentanyl or any of those type of things, but some of you have. And all it takes, how many have had their life, not in their family, one of their family members addicted to drugs? Raise your hand, somebody. Okay, probably about half of the people in here. And a lot of you put your hands down. And a lot of the people here, I know the situation personally. And so let's all stand. Let's bow our heads. Lord, right now I would like for you, Lord, to just grip our hearts tonight. And for those that are here, Lord, that have been putting themselves, that have been dabbling in situations that they know they shouldn't be, from anything from drinking alcohol to vaping to putting themselves in situations where they're trying things that they shouldn't be trying, Lord. I pray that they will examine themselves tonight, Lord, for every student that's here. They heard two stories tonight about one about doing it their own way and how one thing led to another and became a pill addiction, and other that it started with alcohol and marijuana and then went on to other harder drugs, Lord. And I pray, Lord, for the students here. And I pray for your protection on them. And Lord, I want each person here, Lord, to examine their heart, where they're at, Lord Jesus. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, if you're struggling with any type of addiction, no one's looking around.